Hello, it is I, Andrine, your Jewish American Priestess, and I'm coming to you today on the first day of Sivan, which is the month in the Hebrew calendar, that is the new moon. And I am intending to do a reading today with like a full spread. So my idea is just to see what does this month of Revelation have coming up for us. And so I'm going to do a full spread with all of the Hebrunes and see how that plays out. And then maybe we'll do some clarifiers. There's two, if that seems appropriate. We're going to start by just saying, I'm just going to say a little bit of a blessing. Brucha at Shekhinah, blessed are you, divine indwelling presence, who's here with us and provides revelation for us in all times. So here we are in the moment of revelation as we come into the end of the Omer this week. We're coming into Shavuot, where the revelation of Torah is given at Sinai. And we're just going to do a reading about this month. And the way we do this is we shuffle them up, and then we put the whole set down, and then we'll go from there. Thinking about the month of Sivan. Here they come out already. They're ready to go. I'm going to spread them out a little bit. See where they wind up. Okay, wow. It doesn't look, it's interesting. It doesn't look like we have as many as I thought we might have, but let's take a look. I'm going to pull that one down just a little bit so you can see it. Leave it in the general direction. So the way we do this with a full spread reading is we take out all the ones that are face down to begin with, except for the Ein Sof, which I'll leave right there. The rest go back in the container. And then we determine, based on what we're looking at here, what appears to be the center of our reading. And we work out from there. And from where I'm sitting, it looks like it's this letter right here, the Beit, in the center. So we're going to go with that. And maybe I'll leave the reversals in and see, I don't know, we'll see how this plays out today. I haven't done a full spread reading in a while. So when we do a full spread reading, we find the center, and that is our central theme of our situation. And then for me, I read left to right. So when I'm looking at things that are to the left of the center, it's going to be what's come before. And when I look to things to the right of center, it's what's coming up in the future. And things that are above the center line here are things that are useful, and things that are below are things that are either of concern or maybe a fear in our situation. So let's take a look. Let's go right in. We start out with the first letter, the letter Beit. And interestingly, the letter Beit here in the center is the first letter of Torah. In the beginning, Bereshit, the word in starts with Beit. And it's also the word with, and the word within, and the word by. So Beit is a prefix, and it represents many of those small connecting words. But in this case, in the beginning, and it is the number 2, so it's the second letter of the alphabet. So it isn't the first letter, but it is the first letter of Torah. So I find that really interesting, and we're starting with that as our central issue as we are going into the revelation at Sinai. It is the binary transformation of life and death. In the translation of the Sefer Yetzirah, which I read, it is one of the double letters, so it has that binary transformation of life and death. And for me, that is speaking to, say, the tree of life in the garden. That in our very first stories, we talk about the garden and we talk about the tree of life. And the people who are eventually created in the garden in our mythology are told not to eat of the fruit of the tree of good and evil, but they're not forbidden from eating from the tree of life. And there's Midrash that says that once they ate from the fruit of the tree of good and evil, they were expelled from the garden so that they wouldn't eat from the tree of life, because then they would live forever with this knowledge of good and evil, which would be challenging. And in fact, the serpent said it will make them to be like a god. They will be able to discern what is good and what is evil. So, interesting that we have that as our central issue, the choosing of life. And Beit is also said to be a house. It's a dwelling place. It's the home and where we live. Like where do we live in our bodies? When somebody asks you where do you live, you might say I live in this house on this address, or I might say I live in this country or this city. Or you might say I live on the planet Earth. So it depends on where I am when you ask me, where do I live? What is my home? But a lot of the times it's just where do I live in my body? Where do I feel myself inside my body? So Beit speaks to all of that. Where is our dwelling place right now? The letter Beit rules over the day of Shabbat in the week. Each of the letters in the Sefer Yetzirah are corresponding with a certain time. And Beit is corresponding with Shabbat, which is the last day of creation and the day in which we are compelled to rest. It is the day that the divine rested after all of creation. And the divine rested not because the divine needs rest, but because rest is a holy act and we are asked to also rest on the seventh day every week. It is our holiday that supersedes every other holiday, in fact. And we have this interesting holiday coming up this week with Shavuot, where it begins on Thursday night. It goes actually 2 days in our country. So it falls on Thursday night, goes all the way through Friday and all the way through Saturday, in fact. So we have this day of revelation coinciding with Shabbat this year, which is very interesting. The letter Beit is the letter that rules over the mouth in the body. So it's about speech. It's about being able to speak clearly and to speak from the place where one is, where one dwells. I see Beit as corresponding to the matriarch Sarah. She was the wife of Abraham, and she made her home wherever she was. And she welcomed guests into her home whenever they arrived. So if you have a feeling where you feel linked to the matriarch Sarah, maybe this reading will resonate for you. As we come into Sivan, we have this idea of home. Where do we find our home? Where do we rest? How do we take care of what goes into our mouth and what comes out of our mouth? And that is our central issue today. As we move backwards, I'm going to go all the way back to what came in the past, and this is actually lower than the central line. So we have the letter Kaf down here in the lower left corner, and the letter Kaf is the letter which means the palm of a hand. It is the letter that begins the word koach, which means power. So things that we can do with our hand is one of the things we can do is we can exchange goods and services, giving and receiving. We can also oppress someone or be oppressed by someone. So all of those concepts are held up in the koach, in the kaf here. Kaf is the number 20, so it is 10 times Beit. It's interesting that we have 20 here in the lower left, farthest to the past. So something that's come in the past has been maybe a challenge with power or a fear of oppression. And having come out of Mitzrayim, the narrow place, and during the Passover Exodus, we have come from a place of oppression. And we've been wandering for the last 40 odd days to get to where we are now. So something that's come in the past has been challenging around the idea of the letter Kaf. Maybe giving and receiving has been challenging for us. Maybe we've been afraid of being oppressed. Maybe we've been oppressed by others. It is the letter that rules over the sun in the sky. And there's been this oppressive heat here, at least for the last week or so. It's been awfully early to have that much heat. So there's been some oppression around heat and the sun. Because the sun, although it is the source of life, here on this planet, in some ways, it also can be the source of death. So we're back to the binary transformation of life and death with regards to the sun and its strength and power. I see Kaf as corresponding to the patriarch Yitzhak, who was bound hand and foot when he was taken up the mountain by Abraham in the Akedah. And so he had some oppression issues and some fear, and I think ongoing trauma around oppression as well. So maybe that's what's is being spoken of here, this idea of some kind of power, some kind of oppression, some kind of maybe challenges with give and take that have come in the past. And a little bit closer in, we have the letter Ayin here, and Ayin is resting on its face. I find that interesting, and I don't really know how to read that exactly, except for Ayin is an eye. It is the number 70, and it is said to be the eye of the divine watching over us. And since it's tilted like this, maybe it is that watching, looking down, but it's also below the line. So maybe there's been some fear around whether we're being appropriately watched over by the divine. And maybe some concern about this. It's about vision, not being able to see clearly. Maybe we've been looking down too much and not seeing what we need to see as we move forward. It is about the divine oversight, being the divine overseeing us as humans on the earth. And there's been some, because it is below the central line here, some concern about whether the divine is actually watching over us or not. There's a theory that the divine planted us here and then just disappeared, that there is no divine oversight. And that's a valid concern, because these days we don't get a lot of evidence necessarily of divinity playing out in lives in the way that they did in the Torah with the miracles that came. But we also need to be able to see forward. We also need to be able to look up rather than just looking down at our oppression. It's very tempting to look back. It kind of looks like it's looking back at the oppression rather than looking forward to where we are going. So that's come in the past as well. A little closer in, we have these two letters that are right one on top of the other. The one that is here is Tsari, and it's upside down. I'll hold it up so you can see what it looks like upside right. The Tsari looks like this. It is the letter that begins the word justice and righteousness, Tzadik and Tzedek. And so it's above the line, but it's upside down. So I'm going to go with what's helpful is that there is righteousness, but it's internal righteousness. That there's justice, but we're seeing it internally. This is how I'm going to read this. If it's upside down, it speaks to something happening inside of us. And it is above the line, so it is a positive characteristic. So we have the tzadi upside down. It speaks to inner righteousness and inner justice. And maybe looking inside too, because tzadi also begins the word tzayid, which means hunting, as if we're hunting for some justice in the world. And we're looking within ourselves for that justice here, rather than looking out into the world. I think that's what's come next here, is after our oppression and after our inability to see clearly, we've had to look within to find what it is we are looking for. The tzadi speaks to the month of Shvat, which is the new year of the trees. And again, internal wisdom, internal justice, looking to the earth for that, looking to our own bodies perhaps for what we can perceive as justice and hunting for righteousness within. It is the letter that corresponds to the tribe of Asher. And Asher is one of the sons of Zilpah, who is the handmaid of Leah, the wife of Yaakov. And it is said in some contexts that Zilpah came from a different tribe and perhaps named her sons, Asher and Gad, particularly after deities from her own tribe. Asherah is the goddess who is revered through the trees. So there's something about looking inside and into nature and into our own bodies for the divine and the just and the righteousness that we are seeking after having come out of oppression. And above that we have the Aleph. And the Aleph is the number 1. It is the first letter of the alphabet. And I will hold that up. It's a little higher, so it's even more helpful that it's above this righteousness, above this internal looking for righteousness. And what we find there when we look is this balance between the divine above and the divine below, and this connection with the Vav between the Yud above, Yud below, and Vav between, which makes the Aleph, which makes oneness. Because we can say that there's a God above and a God below, but it's really just one. And Aleph speaks to the oneness of the divine. And it's also, the word Aleph, if you spell it with a different vowel, spells Aleph, which means 1,000. So it speaks to that multiplicity of divinity and the unity of that multiplicity. So that paradox of having trillions and trillions of stars but one universe, trillions and trillions of cells but one body, trillions and trillions of facets of the divine but one divinity. So that is the thing that's being helpful in this situation where we're looking within, is to remember that all is one. All is one. That it is the mother letter of air. And so our breath that is given to us by divinity, the atmosphere in which we live, which is sort of manifest of the Shekinah, the breath, the indwelling presence itself, is the thing that keeps us alive, that allows us to choose life every day. The balance of above and below, the oneness, the beginning, the Aleph, and that element of air and wind is also the first letter of the word emet, which means truth. It's the letter that begins most of the names of the divine. We've got El, we've got Elohim, Adonai, El Elyon. But it also is the letter that begins the word for human and mud, Adam, Adamah. So much here as we are looking inside for righteousness and justice, and the thing that's helping us is remembering the oneness of all. And even higher up in our reading, we have that Vav that is like the centerpiece of the Aleph, and it is the letter that means connection. It's also the letter that is the number 6, so it speaks to that almost finished creation. It is a tall, standing person with a slightly bowed head, so standing tall for connection with divinity, but being slightly humbled. And it is the letter that literally means and in Hebrew. So it's a connection letter. It's the connection, it's like a peg or a hook. The hooks that hold together the veils that surround the Holy of Holies. The tent pegs that tether the tent, the dwelling place, the bite, to the earth. So it's really, really essential, these little tiny connectors that really hold everything together. Vav is also the letter that is connected to the month of Iyar, which we just closed out. The month through which we have been counting the Omer every day. That transition place between Passover and Shavuot, that connecting month. So this has come right before, and it's really, really assisted us in our journey. It's the highest thing on the reading today. So we know that it's really, really important, and it's been incredibly helpful. It is the number 6, as I said, and so it speaks to the 6 directions, not just north, south, east, and west, but also below and above, the 6 sides of the divine temple and the 6 directions in which we wave both the lulav and etrog in Sukkot, but also the Omer offering that is brought as the new barley harvest during this 49 days of the Omer. So we have this peg, we have this hook, this connection piece. It's very high in our reading that's reminding us of where home is. And going directly below the bait, we have the Ein Sof. So something has been challenging right now in our lives around the infinite. How do we reconcile everything with the infinite? This is the Ein Sof, which is that without end. It's the letter that is no letter. It's that primordial chaos, that primeval material into which everything is carved in order to create the universe and to create the entire alphabet. It's that blank space. And we have maybe a little fear around that. The Ein Sof is a little scary. It's the void. It's that unknown. As we are moving from the time of oppression into this connection time and trying to find our home, we don't really know what's coming next. We have the chaos. We have Tahom, which is the deep, the unknown, the boundlessness, and the infinite. And the fact that all things before creation were one with the divine. That were zero with the divine, but they did not exist. So there was only nothingness. And perhaps afterwards we will also go into that beingness that is divinity. And I think that's great. It's about fate. Maybe the fear that comes with our fate that we don't quite see yet. That there's some concern around fate. As we move a little bit further to the right, and very, very the lowest thing on the reading today is the letter He. This is what it looks like upright, but we're seeing it in this position, kind of toppled over. And the first thing that comes to mind when I see the letter He is the word Hineni, which means here I am, present and ready for service. So something that's coming up in the very near future, it looks like, that's going to be a challenge is remaining present in the face of this infinite, remaining present in the face of the unknown. Maybe it's going to tip us over a little bit. It's about availability and action and service to the divine. It is the letter that corresponds to the tribe of Judah, which is spelled Yud-He Vav Dalet He. The divine name is Yud-He Vav He, so it's the name of the tribe that has the name of the divine within it. So, and it's the name Judah, which the Jews are named after. So there's something about that connection to divinity and finding our way into divinity. But it's very low, so there's fear. There's concern, there's a challenge here with how do we remain present as we move forward. He also corresponds to the liver in the body, and the liver in the body is in Hebrew keved, which is the same root as the word kavod, which means honor and glory and gravitas. There's something heavy about the liver. There's something heavy about the honor. And there's this ability with the liver to filter out toxins, to find the toxins and get rid of them when we don't want them in our body. We don't want them in our homes. And so there's some challenge here, being able to discern, perhaps being able to remain present and able to discern and filter out toxic stuff, toxic people, toxic situations. And so we are challenged right now with this inner ability to find the discernment that we need right now to filter out toxicity. And as we come a little further to the right, we have the letter Dalet. And the letter Dalet looks like this. It is a doorway. But in the reading, it's like this. So there's something about this doorway that is off kilter. and it's a little bit lower, so a slight challenge. That maybe it's a little hard to walk through the door right now that we have opening for us. That it's difficult to sit with the presence of the infinite, and so when that door is there, that inner door, the door within us that knows the direction, that we're having a little bit of a challenge, walking through the doorway with humility, with wisdom. Dalet represents the binary foundation of wisdom and foolishness. So maybe there's some foolishness, some foolish choices that we're about to make or have the potential to make here. And so the Dalet, that doorway, is a little bit twisted. It's a little bit falling down. It's not quite open, perhaps. That inner door. It's not, when something is upside down in the reading, a lot of times it speaks to what's going on inside. So there's some kind of inner door that's just a little hard to walk through. And it is the letter that is the number 4. So it has to do with that 4 directions. And maybe we're only seeing 4 directions and we should be seeing 6. We should be able to see that direction up and down as well, both heaven and earth. And all we're seeing is the 4 directions, that maybe we're at a crossroads or that we don't know which direction to go. But inside, we need to be able to discern maybe a little bit better which way to go, and really reach back to that idea that there are 6 directions, that there's a connection with the divinity, and that will give us the ability to walk through. And our final letter in the reading is the letter Shin, and it is the mother letter of fire. And it is the first letter of the name Shekhinah, the indwelling presence. And it looks like this. It looks like the flames of fire coming up from the bottom. It has 4 Vavs and 3 Yuds, so a lot of connection and a lot of divinity here. It's as I said, the mother letter of fire, which is said to be Aish. It's got that sh sound to it, and it speaks to spirit. Also, Shuva, which is return. And the indwelling presence, as I said, Shekhinah, and Shini, which means change. And since this is on its side this way today, I'm guessing that it's having to do with having a different perspective on how do we access spirit? How do we receive the indwelling presence? How do we find our way into change or return, the returning as in teshuva. And it's also the letter that begins the word shalom. So, and that's about wholeness. And so we've got this wholeness, but it's on its side. It's pointing back, actually, maybe pointing slightly up toward that Vav. So it seems to be, the outcome here seems to be pointing the way back to connection. It corresponds to the summer in the year. So that's the direction we're heading. Of course, we're going into summer here in just a little month or so. And that summer is firing backwards toward us now and already bringing the heat, as I said. And so we have this passion, we have this spirit that we're moving toward. And it's high on the reading, so it's going to help us to reach for the passion when we're having difficulty accessing that doorway. I'm just going to go through and read this as a whole. We have the home. In the past, we've had some kind of oppression and perhaps difficulty seeing our way forward. We've got this attempt to find our inner righteousness and the oneness of all as we reach up to connect with divinity, which is the most helpful thing in our entire reading. And even if we're having trouble or fear around the unknown and the void, and maybe some real difficulty remaining present internally, and some challenges walking through the doorway that we know, the inner door that we know to find our way, that when we do, we will find the spirit, we'll find the presence that we're looking for. We'll find that connection back to divinity and to that indwelling presence. And I would like to pull out a couple more clarifiers here, because we do have some question about what is this particular? That's what I want to know about. I'm going to take out some Nordic runes and see if they can help clarify here about what the iron is about. What is this thing that's come in the past that has been a challenge for us? And I'm just going to pull out one of these Nordic runes to see. And the letter that comes out is the letter Tiwaz. And I will pull that up so you can see it a little better here. So Tiwaz is the rune of Tyr, is one of the warrior gods of the Nordic mythos. And he was a warrior, but he was also about duty and justice. So there's something having to do with being duty bound here. That we couldn't see our way forward with the Ayin. We were having some challenges completing the duty that we needed to complete. The Tears rune is about leadership. It's about self-sacrifice even, and about rationality and victory. And so in this past, the way I see this is when we were coming out of our oppressive time and having difficulty seeing our way forward, looking back toward the oppression rather than forward, there was some difficulty finding our balance, finding our way into a position of leadership. We kept wanting to look back rather than forward. And so that makes sense with regards to the upside down or the tilted Ayin here. And then one more question that I have about the difficulty we're having with presence. What's that? What can we get some clarifiers about presence and the challenges we're having being present in the future here? We have the letter Ingwaz. Ingwaz is Ing's rune, and Ing is the fertility god. So it's about creation. It's about gestation and internal growth and new life. So if we're having difficulty remaining present, we're also going to have difficulty creating. We're going to be having challenges with our fertility and how we're going to bring new life into the world. It's a difficult time to plant seeds if we're not being able to remain present. So, yeah, when that happens, it seems like everything is pointing back up toward the Vav. Everything's pointing back up to connection with the divine. I mean, that's not surprising. That seems to be always the answer in the way I look at these things. It's always try to find the connection with the divine, of course. But in this reading, it's very poignant that we have these topsy-turvy letters that are bringing us down. They were making it challenging to get to where we need to go, and we need to point back up toward that connection piece with the Vav. I'm going to pull out one more card today. I'm going to pull out a card from the Wildwood Tarot just to get one more message here. See if there's anything else that wants to come out in terms of the tarot. And maybe not, but let's see. If it does, it does, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. Okay, we have one card. And the card is the Two of Bows. It is decision. So it's the Two of Wands in the traditional tarot, and you can see this character has got those flaming bows. It is a fire sign. And so, and it's decision. So the Two of Wands, or the Two of Bows in this case, is all about making decisions. It's about making plans and moving forward. And I love that this looks a little bit like Moses up on the mountain receiving Torah with all the fire coming down from the sky. I think, and like the wildness of the hair and the robes, and that wildness of having been up on a mountain for 40 days with no human companionship, just divine companionship, and the fire coming down. It's almost as if he's holding the two tablets there in the form of bows, and he's making decisions. And I like that it's up there in the stars as well. I love that it's at night and those fires are just flaming. So the Two of Wands traditionally means that one is making a decision and planning on the way to move forward. And I think that's good for this reading. You see that the bows also look a little bit like vavs. They are two vavs. It's how do we connect doubly with the divine? How do we find connection twice with divinity? As we stand on this precipice, as we're standing in the midst of the cloud of the stars around us, how do we find our connection with fire, with the shin, with the Shekhinah, to divinity? And I love that the shin is pointing also at the vav here. So we have some message here that's saying it's time to plan. It's time to make a decision, to pop forward. That as we try to find our place in our home, even if we're concerned about that void, that unknown, and having challenges being present and gestating, planting seeds, if we're having a problem with looking back at the oppression rather than forward, that we can look inside to find our inner righteousness, to find the connection with the oneness of the divine and the connection with all, both the earth and the heavens, and walk through this doorway, the inner doorway, that is also pointing at the vav, and then we find the shin, which is shalom, wholeness, shini, change, fire, and the Shekhinah, the indwelling presence with all this fire here. So that's our reading for the month of Sivan, which we are entering right now. And it is looking to be exciting and a lot of inner work and a lot of connecting with divinity, and remembering that that's the number one way forward, is to connect with the divine and find our fire here. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. And if you did, please like, subscribe, tell other people about it. We'll be doing more readings in the future. If you're interested in learning more about the Hebrunes and purchasing a set for yourself, there's a link in the description box below. But I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful month of Sivan, and hope to see you here next time.